Jessie, James, and Meowth, originally called Musashi, Koshiro, and Nyasu, are the main antagonists of the classic 90s anime Pokémon. The trio belong to a criminal organization called the Rokettodan, who steal rare Pokémon and sell them on the black market. But Jessie and James struggle with their job. Their over-the-top schemes almost always fail. They're a nuisance, but never a genuine threat. They serve the role of comedic relief more than the role of genuine bad guy. In fact, Jessie and James have quite compelling and sympathetic backstories and are shown to be pretty good people outside of their jobs. I mentioned this because for a while I had considered Jessie and James as examples of queer coding, a phenomenon in which antagonists are not explicitly queer but are infused with stereotypically queer traits. These traits are not portrayed as positive and are there to add to a villain's menacing or untrustworthy vibe. Surely the cross-dressing, flamboyant antagonists in Pokémon must be an example of queer coding, right? But the more I think about it, I kind of think that Jessie and James and the queer vibes they emit are not negative at all, and in fact they are positive and sympathetic queer role models. First, let's talk about Pokémon in general. Pokémon was a decently progressive show in terms of their portrayal of gender roles and expectations. Our main protagonist, Ash, was a pretty typical preteen boy, but his two friends, Brock and Misty, embodied feminine and masculine qualities, and their personality and interest weren't solely defined by their gender. Brock was a typical girl-crazy boy, but he was also really domestic. Like, he loved to cook and clean and sew and partake in activities that are generally considered feminine. Misty liked fashion and shopping and was a sucker for cute things, but she's also super athletic and competitive, traits generally considered more masculine. These might not seem like a big deal, but I would say that back in the 90s it was pretty rare to have a female character who could hold her own and be tough, but also be interested in feminine hobbies. And for a guy to have feminine hobbies and still be shown as heterosexual. This brings us to Jessie and James. They are gender non-conforming badasses. They pay no attention to what society expects of them as man or woman and just do what they want to do. This is visually symbolized by their constant cross-dressing. But are they just gender-subverting badasses, or could either of them be queer? Let's start by analyzing Jessie. Jessie's name in the original Japanese is Musashi, which is a super masculine name. It is very rare for a girl to be called Musashi, so already from the name, she was set up to be an unconventional and potentially masculine character. And it's true that within the trio, Musashi is often the more assertive, telling James and Meowth what to do. But she wasn't always an assertive queen. In flashbacks of her former life, she seems much more traditionally feminine and submissive. Jessie was raised as an orphan and struggled to get out of poverty. She tried to become a pop star, a model, and even gave her shot at nursing school, failing in all of these traditionally feminine careers. But slowly she found her path, applying for Pokétech to become a trainer, joining a biker gang, and eventually the criminal organization Team Rocket. Jessie's story is that of a girl who likes girly things, but she's learned that just because she is feminine doesn't mean she always has to act like a lady, nor does she have to be submissive. She's had to hustle hard to get to where she is today. And she may come off as bossy or brash, but in reality, she's just being a strong, assertive woman. In terms of her sexuality, there's really nothing that indicates her being queer, and in fact, she has had many boyfriends in the past. So unfortunately, we can't add her to our roster of queer badasses. What about James, though? James is the more submissive of the pair. He lets Jessie take the lead. He's very expressive and theatrical. I mean, he casually carries a red rose around with him. He's also known to be an avid and enthusiastic crossdresser. Jessie is also known to crossdress, but James crossdresses much more frequently. It's usually for a disguise, but it's clear that really he does it because he enjoys it. James is the only child to his wealthy parents and is therefore the sole heir to their fortune. He was trained from a young age to be a part of upper society, but James hated it. He disliked that his parents dictated his life, including whom he would marry. James runs away from home after his parents set him up with Jezebel, a very controlling girl. James throws away his connections to his family and therefore the wealth he would have inherited. But to him, freedom is more important than money. And his quest to be free is what eventually leads him to join Team Rocket. James never explicitly states whether he likes men or women. Unlike Jessie, who's had boyfriends in the past, we don't know about James's romantic past. But James's decision to leave his family as a result of them setting him up with a girl sounds like there may be some gay subtext here. Yes, Jessie Belle was an annoying control freak and was not a great romantic candidate whether James were gay or straight. But I do think it's interesting that in the English dub, the studio decided to give James's mother a southern accent. Both James and his father have an English accent, evoking a sense of class and sophistication. So why choose to give James's mother and Jessie Belle a southern accent? There is an unfortunate association between a Southern American accent and homophobia. I personally think that those in charge of the dub specifically chose this accent to reinforce the idea that James's family would not have accepted him if he had ever come out. And with this context, James isn't just some boy looking for freedom. James is a runaway gay. Again, there's no way to definitively say that James is gay. And in fact, there was a manga published where Jessie and James get married and have a kid together, although how canon that is up for debate. I personally like reading James's character as queer, and I like that in his quest to find freedom, he befriends Jessie, a girl who's also gone through her own personal journey of discovering freedom of gender expression. These two free spirits struggling to make it in traditional society end up in a criminal organization out of necessity, not because they believe in it. And this is actually a pretty sophisticated and nuanced take on an antagonist. And the idea that criminals are often just outcasts that are looking for a place to belong is a much more realistic take than criminals being truly evil people. So my final take is that James is a runaway queer, but rather than this fact contributing to queer coding, it's an explanation for how somebody who is truly good in their heart can end up on a criminal path if they are cast out by society. Am I reading too much into this? Probably yes. I don't know, what do you guys think? I would love to know your thoughts.